Hi everyone, this is Kyle Marshall, aka Againstime from grinderschool.com. Today I'll be doing a live video for you on Ultimate Poker. I've already got a couple games loaded up here, and a few more on the way. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this website, it is a Nevada-based real money poker site. It's very reliable. The software is suboptimal for those of you used to Full Tilt or Poker Stars, but it seems to be a legitimate site. The payouts are fast. There's a lot of sit and goes. I generally like it overall. The structure is a little different than you're used to. It still pays 50, 30, 20, just like Poker Stars or Full Tilt would. However, it's 7-handed instead of 9 for most of these sit and goes. But it's pretty similar, so I think it'll be easy for most of us to adjust here. The result is that there's a little less variance, but it skips a blind level early on, so then you get to see less hands post flop. So it has some good and some bad to it. Here we made an ISO raise with ace-king out of position, pretty standard. I'm just making a standard c-bet here. We're obviously very happy with our hand. No reason to really be pushy with this. There's nothing we're really concerned about drawing out on us. I do think it's worth c-betting. It's so coordinated that it's likely our opponent would be able to call there. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case this time. For those of you just joining us, you missed this hand here. Strategically speaking, it wasn't really of great importance. It's just this is an opponent who he likes to make big calls with mediocre hands when he feels he's put in enough chips already, and I knew that was the case. And what happened was I made a raise in early position, and a short stack player shoved for about 11 blinds, and then he flat called that shove with I think it was queen 9 or something silly, and at that point I just shoved all in with the ace king. I knew that he wouldn't be able to fold whatever hand he would call that raise with, and he did call me, and it worked out to our advantage. As far as opponents go, I don't really know too many of these players. The big red one's the only one. Well, I know this player. He's particularly bad, and he makes those loose calls, as I said. Down here on this bottom left table, this is kind of my normal stake. These $27 sit and goes is you don't really get much more money going except for like in the prime evening hours. We'll just check this board here. You get floated a lot on boards like this, and our hand still has showdown value, and so I'm going to go ahead and check behind. Would have raised with the Jack 7 suited. I do know luck is real here. He is probably my strongest opponent on the entire site. As a compliment to him, he's a very good player. He's definitely someone to be watched. AK47S is also a reg. I'm not really as familiar with him. Here, it's okay to go ahead and make a bet for value. If we get raised, we can just let it go. But I think there are some hands weaker than ours that can call us here. Looks like we didn't get any action out of that. I won't always check that flop as I did, but I think a fair amount of the time it's okay to do, especially against a loose player who likes to float you. Our hand still has showdown value. The board texture isn't particularly good, and we're also likely to, or reasonably likely to improve, and all those are good reasons to check behind. So don't really have a lot of information on my opponents. That's generally the case nowadays without a HUD. They don't currently allow them here, and so it's kind of difficult. As a result, instead of playing, you know, 15 to 20 tables, you normally play like 10 now. This is probably as many as a person can reasonably focus on and play a solid game. This raise from the hijack in the 25-50 with ace-8 offsuit is marginal. You don't have to make that raise. It's okay to fold it. I wouldn't be open limping. I would raise it or fold it. And I would make the raise more often than I would fold, but it's okay to go either route. Here we'll just check with the king 9. Already been pretty involved with this player, and an ISO raise will just result in him calling us, and then likely doing some kind of shove all in on the flop. He likes to play it that way, and I know it, and so I'm not going to get involved with the marginal hand out of position. We'll even fold this ace-8 here for 30 chips. At this point, we can go ahead and lead out. If we get any action, we'll just let it go. We're just checking the king-queen. Let me reorganize these tables so you can see them better. And we get, just as I said, this player likes to check and then make huge shoves and things like that. So we'll just let this go. We paid a very small amount of chips to kind of get an answer with a potential to redraw, and then we got our answer. And he makes our decisions really easy by the plays he makes, which is always good for us. We get a call here. We have the king high flush. It's possible our opponent has an ace, a high flush, or a boat, or something like that. But we're still betting for value, and we're getting value the vast majority of the time. I think it would be silly to not lead out here. If we get some kind of large raise, we can consider folding. We'll just check here. We're gonna ISO with the ace jack. We definitely don't want to let these players in for free. We have to call here. We're priced in with the king high flush. We'll lead out straight up with the straight, and we'll go ahead and bet here with the set of jacks. We're not slow playing this. At this point, I consider my opponent pretty well committed. I'm just going to get it all in. It's possible he can fold here, but we're just going to get it all in. We'll shove over the limp with the ace-6 suited. We'll go all in here with the set of jacks. If our opponent hit a straight, so be it. So it looks like good results here and here. And we take this one down. The ISO shove with ace-6 of hearts over the limp with Zhao Ying is not automatic. It should be fairly standard, but it depends on the player. This player, he seems to be like a loose limpy type player, and so in that situation it's okay to make that raise. He limped into 4 players. A lot of these kind of players will do that with even hands like jack-6 suited, and so the ISO shove with ace-6 suited at 11 blinds is perfectly acceptable. Just fold the queen-jack even here for 60 chips. In the early levels, we're looking to not get involved very frequently. We want to project that tight image and then take advantage of it later. This is kind of a difficult spot. There's a couple routes here. I'm just going to go ahead and shove it, but I want to explain why I did that. It would be okay to raise or to shove here. Folding is the only mistake you can make. We'll let this go. I don't know this player. Folding would be the only mistake. If you shove it, you are shoving with plus EV, and so it's always a good play. If you make a small raise and a player comes on over the top, most players you can go ahead and call that re-steal, and so that's not very problematic. The problem occurs when players flat call you. 4s don't play very well post-flop. You're not really shoving that deep. I think it was 13 or 14 blinds effectively from the button. You're not risking too much compared to the reward, I wouldn't say, and so I think that's fine to do with small pairs and hands like that. Wouldn't suggest doing it all the time. Against looser players who like to flat call you, it's better definitely to make that shove. Against regs, you can make the small raise in expectation of a re-steal to trap, just as you would with a big hand. 4s would still be ahead probably of their re-steal range. Here we're going to steal with the 10-7 of diamonds. This is a pretty marginal steal. We don't really have a lot of room to maneuver post-flop, but we can easily fold to a re-steal, and we can c-bet most flops here. And we do take it down. We need to be accumulating chips right now in expectation of the blinds going up. This is a super marginal steal spot that I will make. Would not do this all the time. I would say I'd make this raise about, I want to say like 40%. And this situation is just particularly good because everyone has enough chips that no one's really overly committed. And this player is kind of tight, so I think this is a good steal spot. We'll make this raise as well. Players should know me, or really anyone, to know that this is a stronger hand that I would need to be coming in with here to raise into this nearly committed stack. And so when I see this re-steal, it's possible that I'm ahead, but most generally I'm not, and I will easily make this fold, even getting 1.6 to 1. We're just going to check this queen. And we'll go ahead and call. I'm going to let him build this pot, depending on the turn card. I'm happy with the turn card, so we're checking it again. I'm gonna make a blocking bet on the river. If I get raised, I'll let it go. I really don't want him to see my hand at showdown to know what I had there either. Is another good reason to make the bet. Make a good shove here and get a little lucky. Our opponent makes a good call with nines. I think I shoved here with about 8.5 blinds on the button. Any pair there would be perfectly acceptable. And to call with any pair there would be perfectly acceptable. So we both, in my opinion, played it right, and I just happened to get lucky there. We'll go ahead and c-bet this flop. You can sometimes check this, but I think this is a pretty good flop. I mean, it has two face cards, neither of which we have, but we can potentially redraw to a straight or hit an ace. And I think without it being suited a fair amount of the time, our opponent wouldn't have either of those cards. We'll let the 8-4 of hearts go. It's not bad to shove this for 9 blinds. The problem is that we have a really strong stack size to move into the later stages, and not really worth risking 9 blinds for 8-4 of hearts in that situation. If the stacks were reversed and we had the shorter stack and we were shoving into them, I would certainly have made that shove. Just to show you kind of the difference we're looking at. We're less likely to want to get involved with 20 blind stacks like this in this situation. Make a raise with ace queen, super standard, get flat called here. I'm just going to lead out for 500, just a little more than half pot. And we'll be planning on getting it all in on the turn if we're called here. And the bets, I always, and something we should all really do is look at how your bet on each street will affect, how the stack sizes line up with what's in the pot on the next street, so that you can make an appropriate betting line that makes sense. You don't want to be betting, like a third of the pot on the flop, and then on the turn you're set with a situation where you can like go all in for 1.5 times the flop, or you can make some awkward sized bet that really commits you. I mean, you don't want to put yourself in weird spots like that. And so it's always good to look ahead. Really, all the way through to the river would be the right approach, but at least a little further. At least one street, I would say. Here with the 10-9 of diamonds, a re-steal here wouldn't be terrible. The problem is that the big stack is right behind us. We're going to go ahead and call here with the king high. The big stack is right behind us, and he can eliminate us from the tournament. Also, this player is raising through a short stack, who he would commit himself against should he shove. And then a third reason even, I don't know this player. I don't know that he would make a lot of steals. Luck is Real makes plenty of steals, but I don't know this one as much. I'm going to suggest just a shove here because we're on the bubble. Normally I would make a smaller raise and try to get value out of my hand, but you really want to avoid those situations on the bubble, especially when there are players that are close to being eliminated like this. We'll make our... Actually, I was going to make my standard raise of 225 here, but I think shoving is better because these are both regs, and I think shoving will look weaker, and I think I'm more likely to get called. If they don't have a hand, they're not getting involved anyway, but they're never flat calling me, and so I think it's best to just shove there. Made a steal with the 5-8 suited on the button. We'll let this ace deuce go. It wouldn't be terrible to raise it from here, but these two players are really strong, and I think they're likely to take advantage if they have an opportunity. So this call I made over here, I didn't get to talk about it earlier with the king high. I think that's perfectly fine. This player had, I think, like 6 or 7 blinds. Even unsophisticated players who don't know how to shove, they know in blind versus blind you can go in really light. And I think king high is most generally going to be good. It turned out they had ace 10, but it would be perfectly conceivable for them to be shoving all kinds of small suited connectors, queen high, jack high hands, things like that. Plenty of things that we would have beat. It wasn't the best situation, but it wasn't an awful one either, and so I did make the call there. If we make those calls a couple times against an opponent and they show us a frequency to always show up with big hands, then we can stop making those calls. But in general, your default approach should be to make those calls. I don't like a three-way showdown here with ace 10, but for 5 blinds and 3, we're definitely not folding, or 4 blinds, I'm sorry. We're still definitely not folding. And here we're going to make a shove with the ace for the same reason that we just open shove the ace jack. Run into two big hands here, but you have to keep in mind that we'll make a raise here and call any re-steal. You have to keep in mind that for 5 blinds, I mean, players very frequently have much weaker hands than this, and this is highly unusual to run into big hands like this. Small raise with ace king as I would with any hand I play here. We're gonna make a bet here, and I will get all in if this player plays back at me. And heads up, this is perfectly fine. We'll fold here for. Don't want to commit ourselves in the bubble with a medium suited ace when there's already a player already all in. This is close. If we were a little shorter, I'd probably call if I had more information on this player. I'm going to check this. We have the nuts, and this player, if we bet, is committed, and so there's no reason to put any chips in here. I think it's better to act scared and let him do exactly what he did, just shove in there. Looks like we both would have gotten all in no matter what, though. So, same result as we would have had. Should never ever be flat calling raises like this with a short stack with like 7-5 suited. That's pretty terrible. And this is a player that I've seen before. Now that I recognize this hand, so I'll keep that in mind that they're willing to do things like that. Once you know a player is capable of something, that information should be retained and used against them. You always want to keep, yourself honest and them honest, and check periodically to make sure whatever tendency you learned is still the case over time. But generally, players who aren't real serious players won't ever work to overcome those leaks. This is a standard shove, a Nash shove. I don't know that I'm ahead here, but I'm pot committed to call, and so I will. And he made a good decision. He didn't do anything wrong, as expected. We'll shove over this limp. This is, as I said, a very strong player. I haven't really seen any leaks from him yet, which is, I think, pretty big compliment, because I'm always looking for problems with player styles or things like that, and I haven't seen anything this player does wrong. We'll fold this. This player's really short and likely to get involved. We'll just shove into luck is real here. We'll just shove the queens. No reason to get cute with it. We only have 10 blinds. Queens versus kings, heads up. Here there's 15 blinds. I'm just going to open shove it. You can technically do that. I don't want to make a small raise and have him re-steal as he would likely do. We can't make the call then. If we limp and he just open shows over the top, neither can we make the call. And if we make a small raise and he flats us, it doesn't play well post-flop. So in no situation does it go well for us, so we might as well make a guaranteed plus EV shove, which is exactly what I did. And I'll just make a small raise here as I would with a lot of hands, but we'll be happy obviously to call a re-steal. You can just shove the ace-8. We'll close this one down. So, second place there, good result. Let's load up another game. I have one close to loading, but I might as well get another one. Looks like all these are about to end at the same time. Okay, with the sevens, I don't really like this 1,000 raise, but I'm still going to go all in over the top. Three-handed, you're not folding sevens to a player this short. We do run into nines. We somehow hit a set. This should be pretty standard, though, to be coming over the top. I would suggest, looks like he was able to redraw on us. I would suggest pretty much always getting involved here with like sevens, ace-10 suited, ace-jack as a default range, and then you can add in more hands like sixes, fives, king, queen, things like that as you get more information on the player. We'll fold this 5-7. I don't like to shove all in the hand after I lose a big pot because I think it looks like we're on tilt. Even though that's not the case, I don't want to create that appearance. And 5-7 isn't a particularly good spot anyway, and we'll just shove this next hand. Would have shoved this hand pretty much no matter what, and any 2 range would have probably been my default on this hand right here. We'll fold the king-9 after the raise and the shove. go ahead and 4-3 suited is good enough here for between 6 and 7 blinds. We need to pay attention to this player is raising our blind, but we're obviously not shoving all in over the top with that. Shove the ace jack. Shove the king 10. Both of these are super standard. I don't pre-select a lot of options on folding and things like that, even though they're available. I think it gives away a lot of information about your range. For instance, if you pre-select fold on the button and it's folded to you and then you just insta-fold it, every player now knows that there are certain hands that you don't play on the button, meaning you don't have an any 2 card range. And that's a lot of information off of just one click, you know, and I don't think you should give it away. I rarely pre-select options unless I'm in like an early position and someone's just taking forever, because I think from early position doesn't really give much. Shove the ace deuce. Looks like we moved into the money in both of these games, which is nice. When you have stacks around 11 blinds or less or so, you shouldn't be making stabs at pots too often. Here I don't like this situation, but I have better than 2 to 1 on calling, and you should always call with better than 2 to 1 if a call and a loss wouldn't essentially cripple you. I never thought for a moment I was ahead, but I still think that odds-wise you should be making this call with anything, and jack high is certainly better than, you know, a random hand. Well, I guess it's technically not better than a random hand, but I'm happy to make that call here with 2 to 1. I would have called with deuce 7. We'll just fold here. Shove the jack deuce suited. This is a standard shove all the way up to 10 blinds. This is close here. I'd like to let it go though, since we're close in stack. I can lean on this player a little. Shove the king jack. Definitely not folding those. Shove the ace 7. In three-handed play, even all the way up to 12 blinds, I'd recommend almost entirely shoves. This is a good call here that he made with the king 4 suited. It happened to not be the best hand this particular time, but in general that's a good call against my range, and I can't really fault him for that. This is a shove. In the small blind, most of you know that I generally recommend playing a shove fold game all the way up to sometimes 15 blinds, but at least 13 or 14. This is an easy shove with the king 6. 2.5 is my standard raise in this level, and 7s I will raise into the whole table in these 7-handed sit and goes. We're making a small raise here. Would do this with a lot of hands. It's not quite a hand you want to shove. We'll just check the 7s on this board. We'll just let this go. I think this is a particularly bad board to get involved in. I'm not nuts about my 7 high flush draw either. I'll be calling this shove all day long if he makes it. We'll go ahead and load up another game here. Looks like we're running fairly good so far. Uh, 5-6 you can go ahead and shove. It's marginal, there's nothing great about it, but these two are close in chips, and he'll still fold as we see here. 300, 600, we pretty much considered at least one of these players committed in this situation, so I'm not looking to move in jack deuce offsuit against committed players. Um, Even if this player wouldn't have gotten involved, Mojo would have almost certainly been inclined to call. We'll just check here with the open-ended straight draw. Would have thought twice about calling this because he would have been less inclined to shove with this player under the gun having so few chips. Here, I don't really like this spot, but I think I'm getting good enough odds here to call against two players, especially. I think these are really good implied odds. Just check with the 10. We'll go all in here. We're pot committed to call based on odds with any two. We'll let this go with the queen 10. Just reorganize these. Move into heads up play on the top right with our mighty 9 deuce. Alright, here pretty much shove any two cards. King 10 is certainly better than we needed. Check behind with the 9-4. Keep in mind that he's willing to limp in the small blind at these stack sizes, which is a clear mistake, but we need to know that he's able to do that. This is just a shove. We get a limp and a raise. We could be behind here, but more than a quarter of our stack is already in the pot. We can't fold. I think flat calling is bad too, because we'll get a call here and it'll be a three-handed flop with 3 possible overs. I think just getting it all in there is right. This is a Nash shove for 10 blinds. We lose a flip here. Take this one down with jacks and increase our stack size pretty nicely. We'll shove this over the limp. Queen high is not quite good enough for about 11 blinds. Never folding 9s here. And we'll check. This is fine to shove the queen 3. Obviously fine to call with 9s. We'll let this go, and we'll intend to check raise this player a lot. It seems like he likes to just automatically bet, or at least that'll be my operating assumption for now. You can actually just shove the king 4 here. We have a step 4 sit and go that loaded up that I kind of forgot that I had loaded earlier. I'll put that off to the side until this game closes out. This is a good call here with the ace 4, good shove with the ace 7. Nothing either player did wrong. This player limps, we will shove the jack 10 over his limp. We're going to shove over this min raise as well. I think he's changing his approach because he's afraid of me shoving over the limp, so he's raising instead, but we'll see. Yeah, he has kind of a marginal hand here like I expected, but I didn't think he would actually go ahead and call with it. It was pretty loose of him, but if he knew my range, he might go ahead and call there. Okay, so we get second in this one. First up here, we'll close these out. Alright, we'll bring over this new game and load up another one. Hopefully there's one about to load here. That's the great thing about this site, is that you really never have to wait that long to load up sit and goes. Even though the stakes aren't quite as high as I would like, the games run all the time, and any time from, I would say, 10 a.m. to midnight, you could fully expect to have 6 to 8 tables at the least the entire duration. Of course, 4 or 5 a.m. you won't see many games going, if any at all, but during prime hours it's a really good site. WSOP.com has comparable traffic. It's a little lighter in the sit and goes, but the cash game traffic is a little better. The software is also better, but currently I prefer Ultimate Poker because I am a sit and go fan, as you all know. We will load up this last game, and we will call that good. See if there are any higher stakes games being played right now. Yeah, see, like even right now it's 9:30 at night, and there's still 4 medium to high stakes games going, and then some others loading up as well. So that's pretty good, I would say. And of course, in the lower buy-in, there's a lot of traffic. I try to play more in this buy-in range for all of you. I know a lot of you play in the $10 range. Probably $5 to $20 encompasses almost everyone, and so I think this is a good range to play. It's very appropriate, I think. And there's still some good competition here for sure. There's definitely good players. You saw Luck is Real earlier. He's one of the strongest regs. Even on Poker Stars, I would have said that about him. And he's playing a $25 sit and go. And I've seen him play even lower games than that. So there's definitely some good competition too. Player 1 up here is a reg as well. I think he changed his picture. But I recognize him as a reg. And in general, when you see players make these 2.5x raises, it wouldn't be a bad assumption to think they were a reg. That's something you generally do see from more experienced players to try to conserve chips. It's okay to limp here with the Queen 7 in the small blind. And we'll just go ahead and check on this fairly favorable flop. I rarely lead out in the early blinds in these situations. This is a really deep open shove here for 15 blinds on the button. We'll call here for 30. I'd like to be able to see this hand. We'll keep in mind this player is capable of doing that. There are some hands it's okay to make that play with, but not an overabundance of them. We'll just let this go in the early levels. It's not worth the risk. We will try to steal here with the 10-8 on the button. Yeah, we were in a lot of trouble there. This player that I pointed out earlier with the 2.5x raise is probably a reg. I don't recognize them at all, but they play like a reg, so I'm going to keep my eye on that player for the rest of the session, see what I can learn. Alright, we'll be looking to shove on this top right table at our earliest opportunity. The step 4 sit and go, the blind structure is a little different. It goes 15-30, then 30-60, then 61-20. It's a big jump, and so we won't really be looking to maneuver much without. We really only go into the next blind level with at least 10 blinds, so I won't be probably putting a lot of chips in the pot unless I get a good hand here. This certainly does not qualify. I don't like this raise from player 1. He seems to make a lot of short stack steals. I'm really curious here to see if he's capable of folding after raising into a 10 blind stack. This was a pretty big hand here, so we'll keep in mind that we saw him make that small raise with a big hand this time. We'll see if it's always a tendency of him to only do that when he has a really strong hand. It's kind of unusual to see a reg raise into stacks of 10 blinds or less with not just open shoving, because most regs would open shove. Okay, we have our last game loaded up here. Just shove the queens. I believe this player calls fairly wide. I know he's loose. This is going to be a shove too if it's folded to us. Not nuts about it because the player in the big blind's getting a little shorter stack, but we will go ahead and make this shove. And this should be standard. If I plug this into sit and go wizard, it would be one of the weaker hands you could shove here, but it would be okay. We'll shove the ace jack as well. 3 in a row, always nice. 11 blinds deep. Don't want to really be making any small raises with that and putting yourself in an awkward spot. Plus, we shoved the last 2, so it preserves kind of the same type of action, so it looks like maybe we could be stealing here. If we just suddenly make a small raise after we've been shoving, then it may look like we have a big hand, which we do, and we don't want players to know that. This is too deep of a shove. There's no hand in poker that this would be the right play to make with. There's no way to blend this at all. The only hands you could open shove here are, really strong hands, and those are the ones you want to be making small raises with, because if you're only shoving your really strong hands and you're making small raises with everything else, it's a giveaway. So it makes me inclined to believe this is just a bad shove with a hand that probably wasn't good enough to make that shove. We are on the bubble here. This is too big of a raise for this blind level. All raises should be, I would say 2.5x or smaller. There's really no reason to put more in than that. I mean, you're just spending more for no purpose. I don't think you're getting folds that much more often. I just think you're risking more for what you stand to win, and then you're making your c-bets have to be a lot larger as well. We'll just fold the 6 deuce. At 8 blinds on the button, king 7 is most generally a shove. However, being on the bubble and the short stack being in the small or the big blind with the big stack behind us as well, this is actually a fold. That's an important difference to note in strategy, whereas normally you would shove this hand at 8 blinds on the button. We're just going to make a small raise with the jack 10 that plays well post flop, and so we're happy to make a small raise with it here instead of trying to shove it. This hand should have been shoved initially, not limped. I'm fine with this shove over the limp. It's fairly risky, but I'm fine with it. Vegas 666S does a lot of kind of silly things, limp calling rather than just shoving, things like that. Worked out to our advantage though, so we're happy about it. We'll just shove the 10s at 8.5, or a little less than 8.5 blinds. It's fine. Nothing wrong with calling with 9s here. Easy call. These are really big hands for 3-handed. I'm going to shove over this limp. This player does like the limp in the small blind. He could be trapping us, but this hand plays really well at showdown. And we want to take advantage of those limps and accumulate as many chips as we can. Should never be limping in the small blind into a player with 10, 11, 12 blinds. Something like that is most generally a mistake. King 10 looks like a pretty good hand. We'll raise with Queen 9 suited here on the button. And we'll fold to this re-steal. Easy shove. Well, sorry, I didn't see there had been a raise. This is a tough spot. I'm inclined to believe this player raising through a really short stack and into the big stack that he's probably not bluffing. That said, I don't know that King Jack is really behind his range, but I don't really have a lot of information. I don't think I'm getting a lot of fold equity on a re-steal either. King Queen I would have shoved for sure. I don't know that I made the right decision here, but against an unknown, I think it's better to lead to the side of caution in that spot. If he would have limped, I would have shoved over it. I just didn't really have a lot of fold equity after a raise with only 12 blinds. Would have liked to shove about 85% of hands here. 4-3 just wasn't quite good enough. 4-3 suited, I would have shoved. Here we are on the bubble on the bottom right. Don't want to really be limping for 75 here and get shoved on. I would have shoved into this player if there weren't a limp before us. And any two shove isn't necessarily wrong here. I just think we can find a better spot. And there's a better spot. This player makes a lot of really silly calls. I mean, I am shoving super wide, I admit it. But this player makes a lot of really terrible calls. I mean, you can't shove wide into this player like any more than is mathematically possible. You can't take any extra liberties with this player at all. You will get called. But I mean, in general, I mean, you can make a lot of value from a player like that who just makes a lot of silly, overly wide calls. We'll just let the king 10 go. This here is probably like 85% of hands, maybe a little more. Any king would have been fine. With a short stack, we're under the gun. We have 7 blinds. We're definitely looking to make a move with about anything, just as we would like 6 blinds under the gun at a full table. Essentially the same kind of range situation. And we'll die here for our ace-4 should we have the opportunity. Deuce-5 would have been magical. "15 blinds deep here, you can either make small raises or open shove. Both plays are fine depending on the opponent's style. I haven't really set too much of a history either way, so I'm going to make a small raise there. Whatever action I begin with, I try to preserve that to blend my range for a little while, until it just becomes more profitable to do the standard. I'll shove here on the button with queen 7 suited. Make a small raise here. We'll fold the king 9 without having more information on the player. This one didn't work out for us, but for 8 blinds on the button, this is a super standard shove. Even for 9 or 10, we would have shoved that there. So I'm happy about that one, even though it didn't work out. Here we'll make a small raise again. This time we will call a shove should we face one. Into 5 players, you can make a small raise with the ace-8 suited. This is fine to call here. I think we both made the right decision and just didn't, we get in a good coin flip situation, heads up. Hands like king, queen, and 3s are very good when you're about 15 blinds deep effectively. You should never really be folding those. We get called here in 2 spots, which is kind of unusual here. We definitely have to c-bet this, but I don't want to put so many chips in here that if we lose the hand, we're shut down. I'm leaving myself with enough chips to shove. And if we do take it down, we accumulate a nice stack. So I like that result. This one's second. Looks like our session's going pretty good overall. We've moneyed in almost all of these games, which is really nice. We're getting really short in this one, though. We'll have to make a move soon. We are short-handed, though, as well, so should be moving into the bubble maybe after this one. This should just be a shove or fold play for this stack size. Should be no small raises here. We're going to make this 400, and I'm going to shove any flop if I get called. I would just open shove it, but we're a little too deep to just open shove through this player. And so I'm just going to shove any flop. This isn't a particularly good flop, but we put enough chips in now that we're committed and we're not going anywhere. We're going to stop and go, well, yeah, we're going to stop and go this one. We got ourselves in a coin flip situation here with pocket sevens. I think that's perfectly fine. Stop and go here is standard as well. The player left enough chips behind that we could potentially make him fold on the flop. And we did actually have the best hand, it just didn't hold. But I liked playing that one as a stop and go. This is a shove here on the button with the jack 5 suited. Anytime you have a kind of like a marginal hand that or not even necessarily marginal, but a hand that you're committed to call with, but that if you didn't shove, if you just flat called it, you would have enough chips behind on the flop to possibly make your opponent fold. Why not go for that opportunity unless you just have a monster of a hand and want to shove pre-flop because they're committed? I mean, I've made people fold for as little as 100 chips after putting in 7 or 800, So it does occur, and even if it happens one time in 10, that's just extra equity you're adding to yourself in the long run, and so I definitely like to stop and go. Our opponent was right to call there too with any hand that he would have, committed himself with pre-flop. So I didn't really disagree with anything he did there. I'm just simply trying to advocate the stop and go in those situations. You will sometimes get folds. This is an easy shove here with the ace-8. Try to make this one a little larger here. Fold the queen 7. So at this point we're probably up a good 6 or 7 blinds minimum, so I had a good result so far. So anything gained at this point is just bonus. Not that I would play any differently, and nor should you. You should always be trying to play the same solid approach every time, not deviating because of what you've won or lost that session. That just leads to tilt. Happy to get a walk. This is an easy shove, should it be folded to us. Nine eight could probably be shoved for against a player who doesn't really know how to call you, like 13 or 14 blinds. Against a player who does at least 12, just a little shorter. But you could make that shove for 10 blinds against absolutely any opponent, no matter how loose they were. Obviously, shoving ace king. It's interesting when you go into sit and go wizard and you're examining shoves from early positions. They're very streamlined. There's not a lot of variation unless you just really adjust the calling ranges a lot. But when you're shoving from the cut off the button and the small blind, the ranges really vary a lot more dramatically that you should be shoving with based on what your opponents will call with. And in fact, the default calling ranges for the big blind and small blind versus big blind shoving situations at like 7 to 15 blinds pretty much promotes in any two range the whole stack range. And the reason why is because the assumption of random unknowns on how loose they should call is always too tight. And so you really can get away with shoving that tight. Of course, if you do it all the time, players will eventually pick up on that. And so it's nice to adjust here and there, but it's surprising how loose you can go against players who don't know how to call. Looks like we have another player eliminated here. This is not quite good enough to shove. We also have fewer chips in the pot pre-flop than normal, so there's less of an inclination to try to capture them. Would have liked to shove anything reasonable here, but this isn't good enough. This player also has a really loose calling range at this point, so wouldn't necessarily be shoving as wide as I normally would. Should never flat call here. This should always be a shove over the top. The only exception would be something like aces against players who don't know you. Then that would be okay. But in general, you should be ISO shoving over the top. I don't expect we'll see aces here every time or anything. Yeah, threes definitely should have ISO shoved. Plays very poorly post flop. That's exactly the hand you'd want ISO shove with. Okay, we're going to move into the bubble here. We are the short stack. We'll be looking to get it all in as much as possible. We will try to gain all the chips or lose them all. Should never be flat calling here with much of anything. Again, that's one of those rare exception cases where you have a really big hand and players don't know you and you're trying to take advantage, but in general you'd be shoving all in over the top or folding in the face of a raise at this stack size. I don't think any of these players I'm playing against are Regs. Maybe Marillax, but these two definitely not. Yeah, this flat call with Queen 10 was pretty bad. Would have loved to shove this hand, but we're not going to actually call his shove with it. Ace Jack, easy shove all day. Easy call. Alright, so that'll be the end of our session. So very good session overall. Great beginning, good middle, and a little bit of an unfortunate end, but things worked out really well for us overall. And I hope you all enjoyed that. And for any of you who live in Nevada, I really would highly recommend playing on Ultimate Poker. It is a great site, and there's a lot of sit and go traffic for any of you interested. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and take care.